CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman is with us, along with chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. Rikki, I want to start with you. She has already said she is terrified. He has said this is crazy town and a smear. He's also asking for fair process. What does fair process look for both sides this morning?
Well, there certainly is no fair process here. What you're dealing with is there should have been an FBI investigation in order to have fair process. Why do I say there's no fair process today? You've got one person who is a trained advocate who has 55 minutes, and then you have the Democratic side. When they get to Brett Kavanaugh, they get 5 minutes each. You cannot develop a line of questioning in 5 minutes.
Well, but I mean, if I could break in here, I mean, they could, the Republicans have chosen to give their questions to one person. That's part of their strategy. Democrats could have done that as well if they wanted to bring in a seasoned attorney who was an expert in these things.
Why not they all?
But that's a question for the Democratic senators. But why not give it all to Kamala Harris?
But if we're looking at advise and consent of the Senate, is he fit? And if that is the real question here, then at that point in time, it's their responsibility. It's not to hire a prosecutor who, by the way, by nature, does not have the same skill set as a criminal defense lawyer. Criminal defense lawyers...
This is a big moment for her, too. This isn't what she normally does.
Big day for her. No, what she normally does is she helps a victim tell the truth in the idea that they're going to prosecute the accused. Here, of course, we're backwards. It's inside out. She cannot possibly have practice at preparing victims in a way to be cross-examined the way a criminal defense lawyer would prepare.
And also, to your point, I think what's impossible to overstate is how different the United States Senate is, with full gavel-to-gavel coverage on every television network, America watching, than a courtroom in Arizona where you're talking to a jury. I mean, it's a completely different stage for her.
Jan, for the senators here, advise and consent is what they have to do over the entire nomination. But this is really today. This could arguably be just about that one alleged night. I mean, which is separate and apart. I mean, it's a part of the larger advise and consent, but it is a separate thing that they seem to be trying to get to the bottom of today.
Right, and I thought some of the polling that Gayle was mentioning earlier was interesting because the American people, a lot of the they've not made up their minds yet. I mean, the American people are kind of withdrawing their judgment until they see how this testimony unfolds.
As opposed to, it was very clear during the Anita Hill era, it was very clearly against her.
And those numbers changed. I mean, they became more against her after she testified, in fact. Or it's the contrast to Yale Law School this time, where Yale Law School has already made up its mind that they believe Ford and not Kavanaugh. So I think the hearing is a moment, obviously, and you can't understate the significance that they are going to present their side of the story. They're going to be questioned by different types of questioners, and then the American people will decide, and that's going to be significant because who advises and consents? The Senate, and at some point it becomes a political question.
Is this a he said, she said case, Rikki?
Well, it is in the way it's being presented, but we have to remember, we are not in a criminal court where the burden of proof is on the government, and in this case her, to prove her story beyond a reasonable doubt. So we are in a place dealing with advise and consent. But ultimately, is it that we believe his denial, or are we looking for reasons to believe her or to discredit her? What does the prosecutor do in her role now, dealing with her? Do they discredit her or do they eviscerate her?
Well, and Jan, we're not dealing with a court of law here, so we're in this kind of mushy, fuzzy area in which we have a little bit, but also not. But in a court of law, you're only sometimes not allowed to bring in a lot of other evidence outside of the specific question you're interrogating. So to the question of Kavanaugh's behavior in high school, is that relevant, or is it bringing in a lot of thing that sounds bad but isn't associated with the question about what happened on that night?
Right, and I mean, this is not a court of law. I mean, this would never have been prosecuted, this case, 30 years later with no contemporaneous evidence. It would be very different. This would never be in a court of law at this point now. So, yeah, I mean, it's in many ways anything goes. Whatever these senators want to put out there, Kavanaugh is going to have to answer questions across the spectrum of his life about his behavior.
Who has a harder climb today?
Oh, I think he does.
Oh, I think she does.
Do you?
Oh, I do.
Because, she's going to be seen, though, and what was striking even in the Thomas hearings, people who supported Thomas were shocked at how Hill looked credible. She is going to seem credible. And already we see no one, I mean, you look at Yale Law School, everyone is saying that they believe her already. So he's got to change that.
Well, the real question is how she affects those swing votes.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see. Thanks to both of you.